When we travel back through the ancient corridors of South Asian history, through the layers of dust, legend, and memory that time has left behind, we find ourselves standing in the land of Sindh, a place where the Indus River has flowed for thousands of years, nurturing civilizations and whispering their stories to the wind. It was here, in the early 8th century, that one of the most defining encounters in the history of the subcontinent took place: the meeting of the Sindhi kingdom under Raja Dahir and the advancing forces of the Umayyad Caliphate, led by Muhammad bin Qasim. It was not just a battle of armies, it was a meeting of worlds, of faiths, of empires, and destinies. Raja Dahir was not merely a ruler, he was the last link in a long chain of Hindu kings who had governed Sindh for centuries. His capital, Alor, stood proud near the banks of the Indus, surrounded by fortresses, temples, and a rich culture that blended Hindu, Buddhist, and local traditions. The Sindh of Raja Dahir was a land of diversity. Traders from across India and Persia came to its markets. Monks from Buddhist monasteries walked its roads. Poets and scholars gathered in its courts. Dahir's realm was wealthy, but it was also fragile, caught between great powers that looked toward Sindh as a gateway, one that opened the path between Arabia, India, and Central Asia. In Arabia, meanwhile, the world was changing rapidly. Within a century of the Prophet Muhammad's passing, the Islamic Caliphate had spread across vast territories, from Spain to Persia. The Umayyad dynasty ruled from Damascus, and their gaze turned eastward. They sought to bring order to the frontier regions, to expand trade, and to secure the sea routes that connected them with India's riches. The coastline of Sindh had long been a crossroads for sailors and merchants, and the rulers of the Caliphate were aware of its importance. The first clashes between the Arabs and the people of Sindh were not driven purely by ambition, they were sparked by incidents along trade routes. Arab merchants often sailed from Basra and Oman toward the ports of Dabal and Thatta, trading spices, silk, and other precious goods. According to chroniclers, it was the attack on an Arab ship off the coast of Sindh, said to be carrying Muslim women and gifts for the Caliph, that gave the governor of Iraq, al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the pretext for launching an expedition. Whether this story was entirely true or partially exaggerated, it symbolized something larger: the growing tension between two worlds that were destined to meet. Al-Hajjaj, known for his strictness and administrative genius, first sent small expeditions under commanders like Ubaidullah and Budail. But these early campaigns met fierce resistance and ended in failure. The terrain of Sindh, with its rivers and fortified towns, proved challenging for those unfamiliar with it. The soldiers who had marched across deserts now faced a land of marshes and canals. After several setbacks, Al-Hajjaj decided to send a stronger, more organized army, and he chose a young general to lead it, one barely 17 years old, Muhammad bin Qasim. At first, many doubted the choice. A young commander, however talented, was being sent to conquer a kingdom known for its resilience. Yet Al-Hajjaj's decision would change the course of history. Muhammad bin Qasim was disciplined, intelligent, and deeply loyal to his superior. He organized his troops with precision, building supply lines, repairing roads, and using both diplomacy and force as needed. As he marched towards Sindh in 711 CE, he carried not just the banner of the Caliphate, but also letters promising protection for those who submitted peacefully. Raja Dahir, on the other hand, was no reckless monarch. He had long known about the Arab presence on his borders. His kingdom had already seen years of instability, and he understood that a confrontation might be inevitable. But Dahir was caught in a complex web of politics. He had to deal with rivals in his own region, smaller kingdoms, rebellious nobles, and shifting alliances. Moreover, the Buddhist communities in his realm, who had sometimes suffered under earlier Hindu rulers, were not always united behind him. His resources were stretched thin. Still, he prepared to defend his land with whatever strength he could muster. When Muhammad bin Qasim's forces reached the port city of Dabal, near today's Karachi, the first major clash began. Dabal was a fortified city with its temple standing tall above the walls. The Arabs besieged it, cutting off supplies and using siege engines to break the defenses. The battle lasted days, perhaps weeks. Chroniclers describe the sound of drums, the burning of arrows, and the cries of defenders echoing through the night. In the end, Dabal fell. The great temple, once a symbol of the city's faith and pride, was brought down. The fall of Dabal opened the door to the rest of Sindh. From Dabal, the Arab army moved inland toward Nirun and Sewan, each town resisting but eventually falling under Qasim's organized strategy. The march was not only military, it was also administrative. Qasim installed local officials who accepted his rule, ensuring that trade and governance continued. Those who resisted were punished, but those who surrendered were often allowed to retain their lands under tribute. Slowly, the Arab banner moved closer to Alor, Raja Dahir's capital. It was here, near the banks of the Indus River, that the final confrontation took shape. Raja Dahir gathered his forces, his cavalry, his elephants, his infantry, and prepared to make a stand. He was not fighting merely to defend a city. He was fighting to defend his dynasty, his faith, and his legacy. The Arabs, meanwhile, saw this as a decisive battle, one that would determine whether Sindh would remain isolated or become part of a vast empire that stretched across continents. The battle that followed has been remembered in many ways, in Arabic chronicles, in Persian histories, and in the oral traditions of Sindh. Each tells the story with its own color, but they all agree on one thing. It was fierce and it was final. The day was hot, the river glimmering under the sun. Raja Dahir, mounted on his elephant, wore armor that shone like silver. His warriors fought bravely, their banners fluttering above the dust. The Arabs advanced in disciplined formations, their archers raining arrows, their cavalry moving swiftly along the flanks. The elephants of Sindh charged, shaking the ground, but Qasim's soldiers used fire and tactics to counter them. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Raja Dahir's army fought with courage, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The young Arab general's strategy was methodical. He divided Dahir's troops, cut off their escape routes, and encircled the elephant corps. In the chaos of battle, the Sindhi king fought until his last breath. Chronicles tell us that he was struck down near the banks of the Indus, his elephant collapsing beside him. His death marked not just the fall of a man, but the end of an era. When news of Dahir's death reached Alor, despair spread through his kingdom. His family, his queens, and his loyal nobles faced the grim aftermath. Muhammad bin Qasim entered the city, establishing order and sending reports back to Al-Hajjaj. Temples were converted to mosques, though not all were destroyed. Local officials who submitted were retained, and life, though changed, continued under new rulers. Yet, even in defeat, Raja Dahir's story did not fade away. The Arab historians, though they wrote from the victor's side, acknowledged his bravery. They described him as a proud and honorable enemy, one who stood firm against overwhelming odds. To the people of Sindh, his memory lived on as a symbol of resistance, a king who fought to the end, defending his homeland. But what happened after the battle is perhaps even more significant than the battle itself. The Arab conquest of Sindh did not erase the culture it encountered, it transformed it. Arabic became the language of administration, but the local tongues survived. The new rulers intermarried, traded, and governed with the help of local officials. Over time, the people of Sindh absorbed aspects of Arab culture in art, architecture, and faith while retaining their own traditions. The fusion of ideas created something new, the first Indo-Islamic culture in South Asia. The fall of Raja Dahir thus became not only a political turning point, but a cultural one. It marked the moment when South Asia's doors opened to the Islamic world, connecting it to Arabia, Persia, and beyond. Sindh became known as Bab al-Hind, the gateway to India, through which trade, religion, and knowledge flowed. From here, Islam would slowly spread across the subcontinent, not through conquest alone, but through centuries of dialogue, trade, and Sufi thought. In the centuries that followed, poets and chroniclers revisited Raja Dahir's story. Some painted him as a tragic hero, others as a ruler whose fate was inevitable in the tide of history. But all agreed that his reign marked the end of an ancient world, a world where the old religions and kingdoms of the Indus Valley gave way to new influences that would redefine the region's identity. Today, when we look back at that time, it is easy to see it only as a clash of civilizations, Islam versus Hinduism, Arabs versus Indians. But history is never that simple. The people who lived through those years experienced fear, loss, adaptation, and renewal. The Arab soldiers who stayed behind learned new languages and customs. The Sindhi people, though conquered, shaped the culture of their new rulers. It was not a story of destruction, it was a story of transformation. Raja Dahir's fall did not mean the end of Sindh. It meant the beginning of a new Sindh, one that would, over the next few centuries, become a bridge between worlds. It would host scholars who translated Sanskrit works into Arabic. It would send traders to Baghdad and receive travelers from Persia. It would give birth to saints and poets who spoke of unity and divine love in languages that mixed Arabic, Persian, and local dialects. And so the story of Raja Dahir, though it ends in defeat, also marks the beginning of something greater. His courage in defending his kingdom is remembered. His defeat opened doors to new chapters in the subcontinent's history. The meeting of his world and Muhammad bin Qasim's world was not the end of one civilization, but the merging of two. Centuries later, the Indus River still flows past the ruins of Alor, as if whispering the same story to those who pause to listen. It reminds us that history is not made only by victors, nor written only in blood. It is also shaped by those who stood their ground, even when the world was changing around them. So when we speak of Raja Dahir, the last Hindu king of Sindh, we speak not only of a ruler who fought and fell, but of a man whose life became a symbol of transition. Through his final battle, the subcontinent stepped into a new age, one that would forever carry the imprint of both Sindh's ancient soul and the Arab world's new energy. Think for a moment about how history remembers such people. Are they defined by their victories or by the courage with which they face defeat? When two civilizations meet, does one truly conquer the other, or do they simply exchange parts of themselves? And if we look closely, can we still feel the echo of Raja Dahir's last stand in the spirit of Sindh that survives to this day?